Question Everything was born out of a desire for curiosity, a love for people's stories, and a deep belief that through open and honest conversations, freedom can be found. Freedom from shame, from judgment, and from fear. So let's talk about the stuff we've been hiding from. Let's say the things we were told not to say. And let's ask the questions we've been wanting to ask, but have been too scared to. Because when we question everything, everything changes. Let's go. Welcome to Question Everything. My name is Holly Grivo, and I am so excited to bring you my very first episode. So this was really born out of a long time desire to tell people stories. When I was little, my mom, we would take the bus from New Mexico to Texas, and my mom said they would just call me Miss Chatty Box on the bus because I would just talk to everybody and ask questions, and that's just continued. And now I make a living doing that. And so what I have found is through life and through coaching is that there is so much power in just shining a light on conversations, those conversations that can make us feel a little uncomfortable, right? That we maybe feel a little bit of guilt or shame or think we're the only person in them. And so we don't talk about them, or we do in a way that doesn't truly honor our truth. And it just holds us back, and it makes us feel this heaviness. And so my goal in this is to have those conversations with either by myself, having these conversations, bringing people on, having them share their stories about some of these topics that we may not feel comfortable around death, around career pivots, around sexuality, around parenting, around sobriety, around all these topics that maybe one, we think that we're weird and alone and nobody's going to understand. So dismiss that myth. Or two, maybe conversations that are really uncomfortable for people to have, or that they don't understand, or that they want to know more of and aren't sure how to ask. Let's talk about those, because I truly believe that when we can start having these conversations in a collaborative, in a communicative, in a compassionate way, everything will change for us, right? And I call it Question Everything because we have to question our thoughts, our actions, our beliefs, our judgments, right? We really have to start questioning what we're doing so that we can be more aware as we move forward. And also questioning is such a great way to create new ideas, to create connection, to really fully understand people. So question everything. We're going to talk about it. I'm going to have one guest that maybe I don't fundamentally agree with, but I want to hear their viewpoint. So that's what I'm looking forward to doing. And thank you for joining me. It's going to be work in progress, right? So we're going to learn some things. We're going to do some things right. We're going to do things wrong, but we're going to really just have a platform to have these conversations. So that's why I'm here. And so this first one is kind of really what tipped me over the edge to start at this first topic. And so I posted, on Instagram, if you know me, my father passed away a month and a day ago. And I kind of posted about it, and I did not have over the past, as an adult, I did not have a great relationship with him. And so I was really honest about that, saying, hey, it's complicated. Things could have been better and it just wasn't. And I had a ton of people reach out or comment and say, I see that, I hear that. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for being courageous. Thank you for being vulnerable. And it just reiterated to me the need to have these conversations so that people know they're not alone, to know that they're not weird. And so that's why I want to really talk about this, because it's something I'm really going through, is, complicated relationships complicated by grief. I have been grieving my dad in so many different ways and for a long time. So this loss feels out of nowhere. It feels like planned. I kind of forget, and then I kind of take back. Sometimes I don't feel anything. So it's really just an interesting place for me to explore, what does it look like when we have grief that's really complicated by those relationships. And families are interesting. We're taught blood is thicker than water, and absolutely the family's there, but we're also taught to respect our parents, or that we may owe them something for what they did, but that is not always true for everybody. And to demand that in our own expectations and in other people is really unfair, right? It's really a place of unfair to say you need to do XYZ as a good child, which I get into in my conversation today, when that's not what we feel like, right? So it's complicated. And I think, the key takeaway for this is really kind of looking at your own life, right? Looking at your life and saying, what does my relationship? Is it a little different? And, understanding that's okay. And then how do you want to kind of move forward? So today I got to bring on one of my favorite humans on the planet, my brother, Brent. So we're both going through this loss. Have similar but very different backgrounds with my father. But really, we use today to talk about that and, how we're using this as a platform for what happens to us next. and really just talking about how this grief has really shown up for us over the past, I would say years for myself, but especially over the past 30 days. So thank you so much for tuning into the first episode of Question Everything. And here we go. Good morning, Brent.
Good morning, Holly. How are you today?
Good. I feel like I owe you an apology. Yesterday was Brother Appreciation Day, and I did not reach out to you, so I am formally showing my appreciation to my lovely brother.
No worries. I did not know that was the day, but now I'm a little mad. So
But it's today.
But anyways, all good. You look great today, Holly.
Thank you.
Hair's on point.
Hair's on point. Look good, feel good, play good, right? That's what they say.
It is a motto.
That is the motto. That is the motto. I am so excited. I introduced a little bit about this topic earlier, but thank you for being my first guest and really to dive into what could be a heavy topic. So thank you for joining me on this adventure.
No, I'm looking forward to it. Obviously we get along very well. And when you told me about this, I was excited for you because you sounded excited about it, which is always good. And then always good to talk about things and get things out there and have some clarity on the way maybe we feel. And so no, looking forward to it. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks. And, I think this idea has always been simmering for me, right? It's always been this undercurrent of this would be a fun thing. And I'm going to do another video or another episode on what that's about. But I think, with our dad passing, and we both had kind of shared, not the full story, but a little bit of the story, really talking, alluding to the fact that we did not have, what we as society think is a typical relationship, right? And it was a little fractured and it was complicated. And then, to see the feedback of people just in one or two of my posts of kind of speaking my truth, is people oh my gosh, that resonated. Oh my gosh, I'm not alone. Or I felt that really was kind of my kick in the butt to be hey, let's start having a platform where we can talk about these things, right? That excuse me, we feel we're different, we feel we're weird, we feel like we're doing something wrong. Because when we can do that, we release that shame, right? Or that guilt or that heaviness. Because so many of us are going through the same type of stuff.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I think we're all way more common with each other than we think, and have some of the same underlying life tasks that we just don't realize that other people are going through. So I think it's comforting and reassuring to know that. And so, yeah.
Right. No. And, tell me a little bit, maybe just to kind of start this, it's a very layered conversation today, but tell me maybe where are you right now with, actually, let me kind of take a step back. Tell me what the process has been like for you so far over the past month, or even before that, with grieving the loss of our dad.
I would say that it's something that has been, I guess, kind of going on for a while. He's had, different battles with cancer and different things. So he's always maybe had some health issues within the last, 10, 15 years. And so I think, knowing that he had these things and him preparing and, having these conversations, we got a very lovely trip in November to visit him. And so as far as everyone's going to pass at some point. And I think we had a good plan to be able to see him and spend some time with him, before he passed. But yeah, I think I guess I kind of just am grateful that we got to have him for 37 years. A lot of people might not even have fathers, or 36 years for me, 21 years for Holly.
I'm not 37.
And so, yeah, I think I'm still working through things, and there's moments of sadness, but there's also a lot of moments of joy and where I'm at in my life. And I think where you are in your life, there would be no better way for somebody to go out knowing their kids are doing the things that they like to do, and striving for them, and doing the things that, and genuinely we're out there in the world, trying to make our ripples and whatnot. Right. So yeah, I think it's there's these moments that I can, but I'm also like, no, he was also, I think, ready. He's a man of religion and faith and knew that he was gonna be going on. And so I think he was also ready. So I think it's kind of like I am sad, but I miss him. And then there's times that I'm like grateful though that he's gone, because he was obviously in a lot of pain. And even when we saw him, you could tell that his body was just not doing as
Mhm.
well. And so there's some, yeah, peace in that, right? And as you and I know, Holly, with both of our other grandmothers passing away within the last year in their 90s, that's also like a very tough, long journey
Mhm.
of going out. So it's kind of just like, hey, man, it's just, yeah, take it as it comes, kind of. But
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing that. It's kind of a loaded question, right? Tell me how everything's been.
I was wondering what the question was as I ended. I was like, I'm not sure what she even asked now.
That's all right. It's great. That's how this is gonna go, right? Just get it out. Well, I excuse me. I know that we've talked about how it feels, a little different for us, right? Like well, and I'll speak for myself. Like I was not really close to him. We'd had a really fractured relationship for a long time. And so I think that piece of, you would not only was something that I'm like interested if this relates to you is, we knew for a while he wasn't doing great. We set our piece end of last year. He was in a hospice care. We kind of knew it was coming. So it wasn't a shock, but not only was that long, but for me, like him as like a father figure, that role, I feel like he had vacated a long time ago. So I had started to mourn the loss of that father figure years and years and years and years ago, right? Which is really interesting, because I think when we can like take, a person's role and what you expect from them and what you come to them for out, like then it feels, it even feels weird to say, then it feels like just a person, not a father, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
So for me, it was a lot of, I didn't feel like different levels of mourning, right? Yes, I was mourning my father, but I'd also been doing that for years before when I did not view him as somebody who was stepping up for me as a father.
yeah, no, yeah, when I go back to some of the memories of how good of a father was, it wasn't within the last 10 or 15 years. It was maybe when I was younger
Mm-hmm.
in some of these days. And he really was, he would never, there was no strangers. He was always,
Mm-hmm.
very, there was a lot of qualities, but then there's also these times where, you might not have the conversations that a daughter and father would have, or like the dad and son, maybe, that we just didn't have. Um, and so, yeah, I know what you're talking about, in the sense of just like, yeah, he was a great man and things, but at the end, sometimes you're like, man, but that's parenting, right? Like, it's
Yeah.
not called perfecting, it's called parenting. Like, they're doing their best they could at
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, but obviously, that's side note. Also, we've got a great, our mom is like one of the best supporters and love, and like has been there too for us, like in so many ways,
Yeah.
that it kind of overshadows maybe too sometimes, like what
Mm-hmm.
he's done, because she's kind of over the top, if you will. No, not in a bad
In
way,
more ways than
but
one.
yeah, no, but she's great. So it's like, hey, yeah, it's weird because it's not, people are more sometimes sad for me when they find out than I feel like I
Mm-hmm.
am sad, because I'm also just at a state, I think, in a good, peaceful, maybe,
Yeah.
maybe a good place of just recognizing like what it is, and it's
Mm-hmm.
okay. And at some point, in our life, we haven't had any other all of our grandparents passed away in their 90s or 80s, upper 80s. So we haven't had any out of order pecking deaths of like
Mm-hmm.
a cousin or an aunt or anything like that. So
Yeah.
we're kind of like new to this game of loss.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. And I think too, it's even, what when it's a whole conversation of what is like a normal relationship, right? Like what is a normal parenting? Because it's like you talk to different people and everybody has different relationships with, people are always not surprised, but they're like, wow, you and your brother 5 years apart and you're that close. I'm like, yeah, like he's like one of my best friends. He's like one of my favorite humans on this planet. Right. So like there's no I guess structure on what it should look like, right? Sometimes as society we think it should look a certain way and it doesn't have to. And
Yeah.
so I think that's what a lot of and then we feel guilty, right? Like, I was in a place like I felt really bad that I wasn't more sad, right?
Yeah.
Because I was like, if it was my mom or if it was somebody else really close to me, like I would be really devastated. And for me, there was like a sense of relief, I guess. And one, because he was in pain and he was so excited to go to this next chapter. There was a sense that this is what he wanted. But also a sense of relief of like that was a really hard relationship for me to manage. Because it was really hard for me to I didn't feel like I showed up as myself in that relationship. And so I felt a sense of relief, which then added to a sense of guilt, which then added to a sense of like regret. And then it was like this cycle. And then when you can stop and pull yourself out of it. But I think that when we, have these different relations, I don't even know where I was going with this story, to be honest with you, but I guess that's part of this, right? We're questioning things, we're talking about them.
When we talked about this whole thing at some like a week ago, remember we kind of said, hey, let's it's going to organically go in conversation.
It's going to go where it's going to go where it needs to go, right? But yes, I think it's been, because for me it was I don't feel like who I was with my dad was who I was with probably anybody else close to me in life, right? Some of that was protection, some of that was history. I don't, so I've kind of really several times, not several, more often than not, I've been, like, what could I have done different to maybe improve that relationship at the end, right? Or to like find closure. And so I think that's a lot of people get caught up in that too, is like, what could I have done differently? And I've kind of come to the conclusion of probably nothing. I did what I felt honored, what was important to me, which is not always the same as what would be important to me with somebody else. How does that resonate for you, or does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah.
So what has been the biggest kind of insight for you over the past, 31 days of this transition?
I guess I think kind of just making sure that I continue to like create and live the life I really want to, and like in the truth that I want to, and being able to like, take care of myself in all the dimensions of my body, my mind, my soul, like my heart, my soul, I do think like, I mean, I'm no doctor, but like, I mean, with our father, our dad, he had some weight issues a little bit, and not to say that contributed to all the cancers, but there were some health things. But then it's also just like he also, I think, held some weight of burden of life on him that he never really knew how to escape and relief and get and shed that weight. And so I think there's like something to the body where it's just like, we've got to make sure we've got all these cells that are like positive. And obviously, my background is coaching and teaching tennis and health. It's like everything's got to be positive, and we need to believe that we are deserving and all that. And I don't know if my dad really ever knew if he deserved to be happy and deserved to be seeking the things that brought him joy and things like that, where I'm finding all these little things, and I have a good circle and a good relationship with you, and a good relationship with your wife, Katie, who's awesome. And then a good relationship with my mom, and, and so for me, it's just like making sure that I'm really like in the moment and kind of like enjoying where I'm at, and time by time. Cause I think in my life, in my 20s and stuff, sometimes I was in a chaotic, just everything was chaotic. Everything was hard. Kind of. Maybe it was mostly induced by me, but also maybe some of the ripple effects of what I've seen in my life before, and so, I think just being able to be positive in like all these ways, and not to say like, oh, good, but even if it's like, no, this sucks today. Like I didn't have a good day. Like I was mad. I was short tempered. I don't know why, what happened. And then kind of diagnose and look, oh, I didn't sleep, or I didn't eat, or I did something that I shouldn't have done, whatever it might be. But I think it's just kind of having that pulse on like creating the things and things that you want, because I think sometimes I'm deal with things more, and instead of like, no, I want to dictate my life a little more and have the
Mm-hmm.
control. And as I said, kind of the more chaos, organization more than chaos, um, and things. But yeah, I think just kind of wanting to be more authentic to that life and realizing like
Yeah.
we're good. Like my dad he was 69 years old. Like that's pretty young to me compared
Mm-hmm.
to us losing our grandparents at 90, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's just like, taking care of myself, and then also making sure then I take care of my other loved
Yeah.
ones and people like the best way I can, right? And showing
Right.
up. So
Yeah. You've got something like right here. Do you see that? Like a reflection? Like a, gonna scoot over a tiny bit. Do you see it?
where's it at? On my forehead?
Now it's gone. That's on your forehead. Like sit
Is
back
it?
and sit normal. Well, now it's not. Scoot up a little. It's like on your eye.
Oh, I think it's just the sun coming in from the blinds,
Okay.
probably.
Okay.
I'll stay
Okay.
back.
It's classy programming here. Yeah, no, and I think that it's like you said, what do you kind of learn from that? And what I'm hearing is that like kind of dictating your life a little more. And I would even, push back a little on not only being positive, but also like really dealing with the negative. And I don't think that's something he did, right? He was very faithful. So it was a lot of praying, it was a lot of positive, but like I think he carried, like you said, that physical weight, which equated to this heaviness that I just don't, I think there's something to like, there's a quote, and I need to figure out who that is. It was in one of my lessons I've learned is like, there's no path to peace without rage. Because, while he did have, have a little bit of like a temper, which I think you and I both, or I have, can get a little like fiery, right? Kind of that piece of being angry and like getting that out of your body, right? Maybe not rage, maybe that's bad, but like kind of getting it out of your body and like releasing um good, bad, and the ugly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, so maybe let's talk a little bit about what is what would you like, what
What about
advice?
for you, Holly? What about for
Oh
you
yeah,
for the last 31 days? To
yeah,
flip that question to you, sorry.
that's okay. Yeah, so I think for me it's um I've heard from so many people that they were like, your dad was so proud of you guys. He could not even go a minute or two without talking about you, without getting really emotional. You were his biggest pride and joy. And I never felt that. I never heard that. And so for me, it's that realization of like, he was able to show that as much as he could to us, but that didn't mean that like it wasn't there. Um, and so it's like this bittersweet of, wow, that feels really good to hear. And it would have been nice if I could have heard that from him.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I think we all know that, like the importance of saying it, but also the importance of like, I do think, he did the best he could with what he had. And maybe those conversations would have been just too much and unveiled too much of the past and kind of, I don't know, but, and just that, I think it's, I talk to people and their interactions with him and what they saw of him was totally different than mine. And they're both true, right? Like their truth of who he was is just as true as mine, as yours, as his brother, as his mom. Like, so that's like an interesting thing to say. Like, I can have all
Yeah.
these beliefs and thoughts and ideas and my statement of who he was, which is totally different than like the people he went to church with.
Yeah.
And kind of accepting that that's okay. Um, you what do you call me, like a principal avenger?
Yeah.
Of like wanting everything to be fair and right, and I'm trying to work myself out of that because it serves nobody. But yeah, so those two I think of like, just because somebody isn't showing it doesn't mean they don't mean it. And then also kind of that idea that who I thought he was wasn't who other people thought he was, and that's
Yeah.
okay.
That's an interesting thought then for both of us. It's a question would maybe ask, do you do a good job? And like I'm saying you or I, right? We
Yeah.
do a good job individually at making sure people know how important they are to us. And for
Mm.
me, I'll speak on myself. I don't know if I do that. And I don't know if it's
Mm.
And I don't know if it's maybe a difference between, not the difference between a man or a woman, or a difference between just who we are, right? Like, I think
Yeah.
you do a great job. Like your snail mail. See, like your love language is writing people and caring about them and
Yeah.
doing those things, you know, where I don't know if I always necessarily like what I'm thinking about. I do, I think enough, but
Mm,
anyways, I think it's also like, yeah, I think that's a cool point to bring up. Cause it's like, for me, I don't, excuse me. Yeah. At the end of life, you'd really hate to not have told everybody how much you appreciate them.
yeah.
Right? Like, and
Yeah.
so yeah, that's cool. And anyways, so yeah, like I said, for me, I don't think I
Hmm.
do it as much. You could answer it for yourself and how
Yeah.
you think you do, um, but yeah, that's anyways.
Yeah. No, thanks for sharing that. Yeah. And that's something that is probably one of my strengths, right? Is like friendship and connection. And, but,
Yeah,
maybe it's not as deep as it could be, right? Like I'm working on more of having an open heart instead of an armored heart, which is something I learned on my retreat where, I can talk about that later. It's like when I learned of his passing, like this whole like transformational experience I had, but kind of, because I think you and I are both, well, when we're coaches, so we're used to like questions and helping and supporting, right? But we had a tennis party the other day, right? And I was kind of facilitating the conversations, right? Like, because, we play tennis, but we don't know each other. And so it was like, well, remind me where you're from. What do you do? And I like ran the whole table. I could tell you where everybody was from, where they went to college, what they do. Not a question asked of me. Not a one. But part of that is me as like trying to work it, make everybody feel seen and heard, but it also can be like a little bit of a protection, right? So I don't have to talk about myself. Protecting, I don't know what. But I think I could go deeper, maybe that's my point. Like, right, like I'm good for helping others. I'm not always good at receiving help from others.
yeah,
I was a
I love it.
random tennis tangent, but
No, no, but um, yeah, I do the same. I mean, we'll ask a lot of questions, but then we don't always necessarily dig in the other way
yeah.
with
Well,
ourselves. But
one thing I've noticed too around this like grief, and especially I think if you're watching, you are somebody that maybe like it's not, I think that when we think of like a typical relationship, right, of like somebody you have a really good relationship, you're both there for each other, and it's a loss, like it's devastating, right? It's really deep and of what I've seen other people, deep, and it's very raw and it's very I don't want to say singular focus, but it's very much like you miss that human in your life, right? And for me it's like I have this variation of grief, right? Like I grieve like who he was when I was like a kid and I have all these great memories. I grieve just him as a human, right? Like that's sad that he was relatively young. um
yeah,
I grieve like what our relationship could have been, right? Like what we could have had. And then I also grieve like you see like of what it would have been like to have a dad that I could go to, that I could trust, that we could go and have long talks, that he would come to my wedding, or that we could like I grieve that too. So it's like this like wide range of like different versions that I'm grieving. And that's been really interesting because, I saw a lady the other day and her dad had died and she was just devastated, right? She's like, my heart feels like 1,000 pounds. I can't, and I was just like, what would that be like to grieve my dad like that?
yeah.
Because that loss just shows how magnificent the love was. Um, so then there's like a grief for that too. So that's been interesting. But
That is no, that is definitely interesting to think about more like that. Yeah.
well, tell me,
Yeah. No.
what looking back, like what do you wish maybe you could have told him? Or what kind of conversation do you wish you could have had with him?
I mean, I don't know, like their last conversations were always pretty decent because I would just tell him about work and then he would
Mm-hmm.
kind of give his input,
Mm-hmm.
or not input, but just support. But
Uh-huh.
um yeah, I don't know. I that's the thing, I guess I'm like I feel like I did a good job at like trying to make sure I had some of those calls, even if they weren't as often as like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like you said, like like with our mom, we speak with her pretty frequently. My dad, like there might go a month or so.
Yeah.
In general, there was some time like where you just want to talk to him, so it's not like uncommon that I had,
Mm-hmm.
um, and so yeah, I don't, I'm grateful, and I just think, like I said, the way I look at it is for him, it's like, hey, if we were his pride, I think he should be very proud of what we are
Mm-hmm.
and who we are and what we're becoming and where we're going. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think like that's how I like, not that I have to honor him or whatever, or like any of my namesake or anything like
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
but just who we are. Like I want, like I'm proud of who I am becoming, like,
Mm-hmm.
and so I'm proud of you and who you are and
Mm-hmm.
have been and are becoming, so it's like, um yeah, I think we just, being coaches, we're just so like, even, he's a coach and a teacher, mom is a teacher, and so it's like we just kind of grew up in this world of,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, of coaching and teaching, and I don't know. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's like, yeah, there's other things that maybe I like will have wished that I could have learned, but I'm like, I have
Mm-hmm.
other people and like network, or like they can serve some of those, like not purposes, but like
Yeah.
I have like a few, like I've had a lot of good like older men in my life that have been wisdom, like had
Mm-hmm.
wisdom and advice, and it's like, so I think, yeah, for some of the things that maybe lacked in that area, I've had other people maybe fill them up, so it's like, just
Right.
be grateful. And as we said, like he was definitely a good father as we was younger. Like we just got more distance between us as as we maybe got older,
Mm-hmm.
and our really maybe the relationship with the mom getting, or like us being so close with her, it's like it just is like 180, and everybody,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like I just think, like I said, yeah. So yeah, if I had another conversation, I would just tell him, I love him, I'm proud of him, and thank
Mm-hmm.
you, and I will continue to make you proud, like doing
Yeah.
our thing.
Which is what we got to do before we left, right? When we saw him in November.
Absolutely. No,
Yeah.
absolutely. That trip was super special, for all the family, I think, too, for all his brother, his two brothers and sister.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
um, so
Right.
what about you? What would
Good question. I think
it was your question.
that's a good question. um, yeah, I think just, I feel an immense sadness for him. Because I think he had a lot of trauma and like he really truly did the best he could. And he just had a lot of stuff that he was never able to resolve or get past, like, um, or even maybe have the awareness that he needed to do the work on it. So I think like just loving on him, I don't know, besides his mom, like, did he ever have unconditional love really, and that's not something I was able to give him. Um, but maybe just, I love you, I'm proud of you. Thank you for everything you did. Cause like we've talked about, like we're in great places, it's that butterfly, what is it, the butterfly effect? Like if that would have been different, where would our lives be? Right. Like, so just maybe just like a moment of gratitude for him, um, for, what he did. And also kind of, acknowledging that he probably had, like from when he was young, had kind of a harder road, um,
Yeah.
than maybe some. Well, something that's been interesting, and I've heard from different people, like through Instagram or Facebook, is like this idea of being, and I know we and I talked about this specifically about if we wanted to go back and see him before he passed, right? Because we had gone in November, early December. The idea of like being a quote good kid, a good parent, or excuse me, a good kid, good daughter, good son, doing the things you should do, right? How has that come into play, or has it come into play for you about what a good son does in the situation?
yeah, I guess I did have a time where I was, maybe wanting to go back and visit him again, right? Like where some of
Mm-hmm.
that might have, I don't, there was like, I just felt like it was like, if I don't go see him, that's just kind of rude. But um, I think it comes back to just truth and honesty and communicating with somebody, like, which
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I say, yeah, like we create this like thing where it's like, why don't we just ask the person and see what they think too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, is it important to them? Because it was never something where he was, like asking us to come back. I think he really enjoyed that time in November and was like, and when I left Durango, where he was, I I was leaving thinking, this is the last time I'll see my dad. And in fact, it was. But
Mm-hmm.
going back would have just kind of rehashed or you know, open up things that it's like, well, I already went to kind of go and heal, maybe, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and honestly, like in the shape that he was, like, it wouldn't have been like we would have that much conversation. We could have spoke on the phone
Mm-hmm.
still. And then when I did talk with him, he's like, no, just don't worry about it. He's like, it was great. Like we're good,
Mm-hmm.
like, so, yeah, I mean, I didn't, yeah, I think it just comes back to like, do what's right and what feels right and
Mm-hmm.
communicate with people and have the
Yeah.
conversations and don't, yeah, everything's so unique. Everybody's situations are so uniquely different that it's like, do
Yeah.
what's best for you.
And that's hard, right? Because I think I mean, you and I had the conversation is that like, and I was like, I don't feel like I need to go back, but like, I felt like I should because what does it look like, right? Like, what will people say that you did not go back and see your dad right before he passed? Like,
Yeah.
isn't that what a good daughter does, right? And it was like, and then, it was that piece, like you said, like we did that and we had the conversation. He was like, no, I don't need that. We all agreed that if any of us changed our mind, then we would be able to make that known, right? Like,
Yeah.
which I think we were like, absolutely. But like, it was never, for me personally, right? I can't speak for you. It was never that I felt I needed to or he needed me to. It was like, well, isn't that what like a good daughter and a good person does?
Yeah.
And I want to be a good daughter and I want to be a good person and a good friend and a good human. And that doesn't align with this action. And so you're like, well, shit, do I do that? And I'm like, I don't like, it also seems like a really bad reason to do it. Like that didn't feel genuine to me to go just to like check off a box.
Yeah.
But I think we do that a lot, right? And we have this pressure because, I do respect him and I do appreciate everything he did. And I also respect myself and have my values of what I'm going to allow into my life. And so finding a balance or not even a balance, like a compromise of those,
Yeah.
um, I think has been interesting.
Yeah. No, I think some of it's just like, yeah, we don't know until we go through it and,
Yeah.
and ask and have yeah, I think it's just all about having the truth, like speaking your truth.
Mm-hmm.
And for you, it's hard because your truth sounds like it's kind of been like, you're not like that with anybody else. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I would also probably say, even for like dad, I'm sure if you go to all those, if you ask all those other relationships, it's like within the family, I think, like, and this is also generational stuff, right? Like where his dad was like super successful outside of the home, but sometimes in the home didn't take care of things, didn't
Mm.
necessarily know how to have the capacity to either. He
Yeah.
wanted to, he was an orphan, right? Like he lost his mom and dad at a young age.
Yeah.
Our grandfather, sorry, he did. And so you're like, I think it just comes back to this, hey, let's break these cycles and
Yeah.
these chains of what it was and is. And it's not like no one's wrong. It's just they were never being belligerently wrong. They just
Yeah.
didn't know any better.
Yeah.
And now that if we know, just being aware and helping and yeah,
Yeah.
tangent.
No, that's a good tangent. Well, I think for me, I know that I'm healing is because, I was talking, I've been, and this may be a whole different episode, like very, angry and hurt by things that he's done. And so, and I saw a lot of hypocritical actions that like being a principal avenger or captain principal avenger is like really uncomfortable for me. So I would find myself kind of getting wrapped up in all these details all the time. And I really moved from punishing to processing. If that makes so like if I think back on something, it's not to like punish, but more to like process where I currently am. And it feels like so different in my body, right? Like when I would punish, I'd get real like wrapped up and hot and like kind of like
Yeah, you're probably
angry.
your body physiologically is
Yeah,
your heart rate. If you had a heart
physically,
rate monitor, it's probably
probably.
going up. Your resting heart rate's rising.
Totally. Because I'm
Yeah,
like,
you're
blah, 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 blah,
sweating.
blah. And then you think back, and, we all know that when your body thinks back to something 15 years ago, your mind like puts you back in that situation. Right. So you're just like always in this like, and now it like feels very much like I can look back and be like, oh, yeah, that makes sense to help process this. And so I think that's been
Yeah,
really key for me is, and it's not a total, I'm still working through it. Right. But it's more of a processing and understanding versus like an anger and a punishing for me.
no, yeah, I like that. I think that's a useful in many situations, probably.
And it's funny, even when I catch myself going back, like you said, I got a new watch. I'm like, maybe to see, does my blood pressure shoot up? Like,
Yeah,
does my heart rate, what would heart rate, whatever,
yeah, I think your heart rate would. Yeah,
my body temp, would it like get heated? Cause I think it probably would.
yeah.
Um, well, and I think, what maybe, as we kind of wrap up, what would be, you know, I don't even know if I don't even like the word advice, but like if somebody's watching and they have this like complicated relationship with a family member and they're just like really struggling with like what to do with that, what would be something you would suggest to them?
Hmm. Yeah, I guess it'd be like my advice maybe with any sort of relationship is like I don't know, like if you can try to look at some of the good, like I don't know, find the good in people as much as we can, I guess. But that's kind
Mm-hmm.
of can be kind of rah-rah sometimes, especially if people are like
Yeah.
beating you up and pounding you down. It's like,
Right.
no, screw you. This person's like maybe a bully or, things like that. But
Mm-hmm.
maybe to also just like recognizing boundaries also, right? Like at some
Mm-hmm.
point, like, hey, if you need to separate yourself from this, and if you can, like do that. Don't communicate if it's
Mm-hmm.
something that's they're not really bringing value in it
Yeah.
for any relationship or action or anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Probably like see if you can or disassociate, or
Mm-hmm.
really dig in maybe to the other relationships that really find where you do find the love and let that overfill you maybe with more joy, right?
Mm-hmm.
If it's one relationship, but um no, I think the family dynamics are always hard and um, can be different for everybody
Mm-hmm.
in situations and stuff. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I don't know if I have necessarily the best advice because I feel like most of my relationships with all of my family is good, I guess. And maybe it is a little
Mm-hmm.
distance, but I don't know what everyone else's families are like, but I do know when I get
Right.
back to my family, it's kind of like how it was. So
Yeah.
that's a good sign, right? Like that's kind of
Yeah.
like an old friend when it's like, hey, I see my old friend
Mm-hmm.
from 10 years ago and we kind of go off on the same thing. It's kind of like that with most of my family members,
Yeah.
and so I'll have to say I'm like kind of grateful for that. You and I getting along so well. That's very
Mm-hmm.
cool and not necessarily common as much as we would think because we're used to it. We're like, wait, you don't your sibling isn't one of your better friends. That's
Yeah.
you don't talk to him very much. Like that's kind of
Best
crazy.
friends.
No, like third, fourth best friend. But no,
Yeah.
and so yeah, like I said, I don't know if I'm like necessarily have the best advice, but I would just say, yeah, look for the good, and then also if you have to take yourself out of a situation, maybe that's what you need to do to make
Mm-hmm.
yourself, yeah, better
Yeah.
off.
Yeah. I think that is, I think love what you said too is like, I don't know what your families are like, right? I think that's the problem is that we think we're doing it wrong when we start comparing ourselves to other people,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Because it is all different. Like there's billions of people on this planet. How in the world would all the relationships be the same, right? Like we people it
yeah,
up, we do things like we're all different. And so it's like, I think it's like find, your relationship is what it is, right? Don't worry what everybody else's looks like. and kind of really, I love that you said that, like I said, a boundary, right? Like, what are your values around that relationship? What are you willing to tolerate? What are you not? Like, what feels right to you? And those can really be conflicting, right? So it may take a little bit of time and work and trial and error to see what does and doesn't. But for me, it's really kind of like most things in life, kind of staying in your own lane, right? Like you're not doing it wrong per se. You're not weird. Like it's just part of
Yeah.
life, or just
It's
like
just,
not hearing about it, right? It's like when all of a sudden you find out like friends are getting divorced. You're like, but they look so happy. And you're like, yeah, because like everybody has their stuff. Um, so you just got to manage your own stuff.
yeah.
Good, bad, whatever that looks like. And then you can change it, right? Like you've said, we have a phenomenal mom. You can form relationships with other people to get what you need. Like family is amazing, but that doesn't have to be like our only thing,
Yeah.
right? Um,
No, I think you're right. I think, yeah, yeah, we all reflect what we want and get back, right? And so
mm-hmm.
if you, whatever you want is probably what you're getting sometimes in some situations. So it's like, yeah, share the love and
Yeah.
share the encouragement and everything for people.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Well, before we wrap up, I have two questions for you. What are you really questioning right now or curious about? What in your life are you kind of like, that's interesting, or I want to know more, or I don't quite understand that? Big or
In
little?
my life, big or Bitcoin? No,
Yeah, that's fair. EFTs
no, I
or
have no
NFTs?
clue what that is. No,
Uh,
yeah, I would say I even after our conversation, I guess today too, somewhat is just making sure not that so much curious, but yeah, making sure that I'm pulsing out the like appreciation and love for the people
mm-hmm,
and being maybe a little bit more particular on it, you know,
mm-hmm.
and like diligent on that part as far as things to do. But curious on things. Yeah, I'll be honest, I know a lot and pretty much everything. So
Oh,
like I'm pretty
shocker.
smart.
Shocker. White guy who
No,
thinks he knows everything.
no, I guess it's just kind of like I stay in my lane too sometimes, like
mm-hmm,
which is not necessarily like always
mm-hmm.
productive. But I'm like, for me, I'm trying to be in this like moment of doing a lot of things I enjoy as far as like work, and then my other time and like
Yeah.
enjoying my friends and enjoying like my day-to-day life and like organizing
Mm-hmm.
that right now to like where it's like I look back at every night and like when I turn on my lamp and turn off my light and turn my fan on, I'm like, oh, this is a good day. Like I'm ready to sleep. Like,
Yeah.
you know, so for me, it's like I do want to continue to like just continue to learn more about things and people, but um yeah, I think it's just owning who I am. And I think, you know, losing dad, it's kind of like I get like a rebirth of like after
Mm-hmm.
dad and like who I really want to be as a man. And even me being a single guy, and so good looking, right? You're like, no, but being single, which is great. And I'm super grateful because I'm like sharpening who I want to be. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to get exactly once again that reflection when I do find that it's going to be freaking great and awesome. So I think
Mm-hmm.
like projecting that more, but then also just looking at it and being maybe some of the things of like breaking that cycle of no, like I look at dad and like mom's past relationship and some of the things of how maybe they broke up or like they divorced and like thinking that that is who I am and what I
Mm-hmm.
or what I could be instead of like no no
Mm-hmm.
no no yeah you could be that but just don't be that, right? Like
Yeah.
so for me, yeah, just like probably like uh yeah, just being okay with realizing like yeah, I don't know, I guess I'm just got to go out there and like recognize I can do anything I want to do
Mm-hmm.
and I'm
Yeah.
deserving of it all if I want it, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And I think
Yeah.
of that way in like a lot of things like sports. I'm thinking that I haven't necessarily always in relationships because I just haven't
Mm-hmm.
been in one for a while, but I'm also like I'm fine, like because once you get in one forever you're stuck, right? I mean, no, I'm just
Oh, it's
kidding.
not
But
stuck.
it's no, I know. I'm not. I'm all joking aside. Another thing, you don't need to joke about things that aren't
That's true
no.
too.
But no,
Your body
it,
listens.
but I do think it's like continuing to do that. I think for me, probably exploring more writing for
Mm-hmm.
myself, also because of just the clarity of which it will
Yeah.
bring to my thoughts and my processes and
Mm-hmm.
my words. And I think the more as I get older, hopefully I'm giving more knowledge and not just
Mm-hmm.
being and not my 20, 30 or 25-year-old self, right? Like
Yeah.
just kind of
Awesome.
a new version. But what about you?
Cool.
What are the things
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. I love that
that
because I
you
love too. It's
sorry,
kind of like
that
we
was a
don't
lot.
always have to be in a place of question. You know what I mean? It's okay to find to be like, I'm good here right now. Like I've done a lot of work to get to this place. I want to like fine tune it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm really curious about one who orders DVDs on Netflix.
Hmm.
Is an option on Netflix. That's something I'm curious
Yeah.
about. Who's doing that anymore? Because I don't have a DVD player. Do you?
Don't have a DVD.
You know, okay. Yeah. So very curious about that. And I think I'm starting to question, what am I starting to question? I had that question ready and I'm not even ready with my answer. That's a hard question. It's kind of a big
Thank
one,
you. I
right?
got good ones.
It's a that's my question.
Oh,
I think I'm starting to question this. I am questioning this, right? And I'm working through it. Kind of this ease. Can a life of ease and can a life of ease be the way to success and not hustle, right? And not productivity and like starting to question my current and my past operating of like go do structure. That's how we get to success. Like, is there a different way to do it that would be a lot less stressful? So kind of toying with that through my teachings I do with, or my in the work I do with in mind magic with Tracy Litt. And so it's work I'm kind of like thinking through of like, should we be in this hustle culture? Right. This like, because it seems like we're all in this hustle culture and everybody's like miserable. So I'm kind of questioning, I'm in the process of questioning that.
yeah. No, that's such a good question. I think for yeah, I think finding that balance, I guess, right? Like where you're like,
Mm-hmm.
wait, I could have worked it. You could have worked it 60% of your
Yeah.
occupancy and still been just as happy, and you're still getting the same monetary thing, right? You're like, wait, I didn't have to do all of that.
Yeah.
Like,
Like
um,
quality over quantity.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, I think that's a good insight, and
Yeah.
yeah, as somebody who I do enjoy my job, and it is a different like coaching tennis, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
out there in different things, but um, yeah, I think it's always good to wonder if it's like, could less be more, right?
Yeah. And is it,
Possibly.
yeah. So I think that's something I'm kind of, it's interesting. Well, thank you so much for being on my first episode. I hope you will come
Thank
back
you,
because
Holly.
we're going to talk about fun stuff.
I look forward to being back. I appreciate your time. And yeah, I think as you said, we're all very similar in our ways, and so I think
Mm-hmm.
sharing some of our truths and everything is going to be great for not just us, but hopefully other people in interaction. So love to hear any feedback and insight
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you
from
so
your
much and have a great
fans.
day.
All right, Holly, love you.
Love you too. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the first episode of Question Everything. I'm so excited. This was so much fun for me. So thank you for tuning in. And I hope you got something out of it. And I'd love to hear, what is it you're questioning? Are you questioning maybe boundaries you need to set up with the family members in your life? Are you questioning maybe how you want to show up in a different way? Brent had talked about how he wants to really show up and let people know how they care, how he cares about them, right? And then, or maybe it's, are you questioning your judgment you have? Are you judging yourself a lot around the relationship you have and comparing it to other people? Because like I said, there's billions of people in this family, millions of families, billions of families probably, and we're all not the same. And so I'm really curious what you're questioning after this episode and what else you're kind of curious about. I really am curious who's getting DVDs from Netflix. I mean, that's how I started, but that was like early 2000s. So it's not all heavy topics, but thank you for tuning in. I'm going to be doing these probably every other week, still trying to figure that out. But would love for you to subscribe, share with a friend, or also send me topics you want to have that you want to talk about, right? no topic off limit. I want this to be engaging, informative, collaborative, so that we can all really understand that, as different as we are, how similar we really can be. So thank you so much and have a great day.